Today I'm going to show you how to stand properly. What's going on, everybody? It's Blake Bowman here with Gorilla Zen Fitness, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to stand properly. So I'm always advocating that people stand as opposed to sitting whenever they have a chance. Things like standing desks I'm a really big fan of, primarily because standing does not create the same muscular imbalances and decreased circulation like sitting does, especially for prolonged periods of time. However, this does not mean that you can stand in any position that you want to. Standing can be just as damaging as sitting if you do it for prolonged periods of time in compromised positions. So if you're like leaning from side to side, leaning on a desk or something like that, or you're standing with common postural distortions, then it can actually be pretty damaging. Similar to my video on sitting, in today's video I'm going to be going over the proper alignment and posture that you're going to want to have when you're standing for long periods of time, as well as some additional strategies to give you even more benefit. I'm going to be demonstrating on my standing desk, but it really doesn't matter if you're standing at a standing desk or standing up in an open space, the same rules apply. So let's get started by looking at what an ideal standing posture is going to look like. So as usual, we're going to break this down piece by piece, starting by looking at the legs. So your feet should be approximately shoulder width, okay? But really I encourage you to take whatever feels most comfortable for you. If you've seen my interview with Dr. Ryan DeBell, in that video he talks about how everybody has different hip architecture, okay? At the top of everybody's femurs, their leg bones are different. So some people might feel more comfortable standing with a shoulder width stance. Other people might take a stance that's wider than shoulder width with a little bit of external rotation in your feet. Whatever feels best on your hips and back is what I would recommend you take. From here, the second most important point that you want to focus on is basically screwing your feet into the ground, as Kelly Starrett says. Basically what that means is keeping your feet gripped into the ground but applying external rotational force to it, as though you're trying to twist them out, okay? So you're applying the same rotational force through your femurs that would otherwise turn your legs out like this. However, your feet are gripped into the ground, so when you do that, it just lifts up your arches. And another thing that does is it sets your pelvis into a more neutral position, which is why we're doing it. Okay, so now we're going to look at the pelvis and anterior core musculature, which just means the muscles on the front of your body here. So this is another tip from Dr. Kelly Starrett to promote a neutral pelvis. Remember, the pelvis sets the position for the rest of your spine. The pelvis is intimately connected to the lumbar spine, your lower back, okay? So the position that your pelvis is in is going to drastically influence the position of the rest of your spine, okay? And we want to keep that pelvis in a neutral position. So a lot of people are tilted forward, anterior pelvic tilt. You all know about this by now. So what we're going to do to neutralize that, two things. One, squeeze your core muscles, okay? You're going to squeeze your abs as though you're anticipating a punch. And the second thing that kind of goes along with the screwing the feet in is engaging the glutes. Okay, so you should be at about 40% contraction, maybe a little bit less than that, basically all throughout the day. Those feet are screwed in, butt is tight, core is tight. That's going to take you out of this position more into this position. Okay, now we're going to bring our attention to the upper back, neck, and head. Here you're going to want to follow the same rules as you would when you're sitting, okay? Basically, you want to keep that thoracic spine extended, okay? You want to keep those shoulders rolled back, and you want to keep that head on top of your vertebral axis. Okay, so now that you know what an ideal standing posture is going to look like, I want to talk a little bit about the ergonomics of your work setup. So if you are using a standing desk, there are two very important points that I want you to keep in mind. One is the position of your keyboard, and two is the height of your screen, okay? Ideally, you want your keyboard to be at basically a level so that when your hands are resting on it, your elbows are about 90 degrees, maybe a little bit lower, but I mean honestly this keyboard should be up a little bit higher. I have to extend my elbows a little bit more than 90 degrees, but you would want it ideally right here so that elbow's at 90 degrees. And the second thing you want to pay attention to is the screen height. Like I said, you want that at the same level as your head. So I'm working with a laptop right now, so that's kind of like encouraging me to look down like this. Okay, it's hard to keep that head on top of the vertebral axis if your screen is this low. Okay, so I wouldn't actually recommend using a laptop on a standing desk. What you can do is you can get a auxiliary cord, plug it into your laptop, and then hook that up to an additional screen, an external screen or monitor. I use a TV at my house. Basically, but that's mounted at the same level as my head. So I can stand here, not worrying about my low screen pulling me forward, pulling my head forward, causing kyphosis. Keep it at the same level as your head if you can do this, and then type right here. If you have to use a laptop, like me right now, I don't have a screen here. It's possible to keep your head on top of your vertebral axis, but just realize that the low height of the screen is going to kind of encourage you to look down at it like this. Okay, so if you are using a laptop screen, just make sure that you're cognizant of your head positioning and you're not letting it pull you forward. Okay, so by this point I've already gone over all the basics of a standing work setup, including the posture and the ergonomics. Now I want to share some additional tips and tricks to make your standing even more enjoyable. So a lot of people have a hard time keeping their chest open and shoulders rolled back. If you just try to pull your shoulders back like this, it's not very effective because of soft tissue restriction in the front of your chest and shoulders here. Basically, if you just pull them back, you're going to find that your shoulders have the propensity to kind of just fall right back into that forward position. So what I'm going to share with you now is a technique from somebody named Esther Goplay, who is really like the world's foremost posture expert. Go ahead and do a Google search on her. She's very respected, but she has a technique that she calls the shoulder roll, which basically entails taking one shoulder at a time, pushing it forward, elevating it, pulling it back, and then letting the scapula, your shoulder blade, rest down your spine. Okay, then you do that to the other shoulder, like separately. Okay, it's important that you don't distort the position of your body when you're doing this. You want to keep your torso upright, keep your ribs stationary. Push that shoulder forward, elevate it, pull it back, and then let that shoulder blade come to rest down along your spine. Basically what this does is, in her own words, it kind of ratchets the soft tissues in the front of your shoulder here back a notch, so that you'll find that your shoulders just kind of rest more easily back here without you having to be conscious of pulling them back. Another technique I want to share with you is foot rolling. So if you're standing on your feet all day, then they're undoubtedly going to get tight after a while. And one way to really loosen up that plantar fascia, the connective tissue in the bottom of your foot, is with foot rolling. I would encourage you to look into something called an induction mat. That's what I stand at home. But if I'm not standing on an induction mat to keep my feet loose, I will do foot rolling. And basically that just consists of using a lacrosse ball or softball and running that up and down the arch of your foot, maybe doing a little active release, okay, with those plantar muscles like this, pumping the toes, and just putting a lot of body weight in there to keep that fascia nice and loose. My last tip for you is in regard to lymphatic circulation. So your lymphatic system is basically your body's waste system, waste removal system, and it's very much like the cardiovascular system in that it's kind of like all over the body. However, unlike the cardiovascular system, it doesn't have a central pump like a heart to circulate fluid through it. Instead, your lymphatic system needs movement. It needs muscular contraction and movement in order to get fluids to circulate through it. So this is one of the reasons why you might feel really shitty sitting on a long flight or car ride after having not moved for several hours, because essentially your lymphatic system has stagnated and become somewhat like a cesspool. There's no running water through it. It's kind of like a pond with just a bunch of shit building up in it. Standing is inherently better for keeping the circulation up. However, if you're just standing there not moving for several hours, you're going to get the same kind of lymphatic stagnation that you can get with sitting. So there's a couple of easy ways to remedy this. One is just to go for a walk every 20 minutes. I talked about this in my sitting video. Another one that I like even more that allows you to stay at your workstation is just full body vibration. So it looks kind of weird, but basically what you do is you just kind of like shake your body like this, okay? So you just kind of vibrate your whole body. It might look kind of weird, but who really cares at this point? On a concluding note here, standing can be a big shock to your body, especially if you've been sitting for most of your life. So with that being said, if you find that you develop a lot of aches and pains when you're standing and you really have the urge to sit, then go ahead and sit. Sitting becomes really damaging when it's done excessively and for long periods of time. You know, if you want to take like a 5 or 10 minute break and sit down for every hour that you're standing, that's fine. So if you develop any weird types of aches and pains when you're standing, I would encourage you to A, take a break, and B, analyze and assess your own posture. You know, if you're standing with these common postural deviations that I talk about in my videos, then that can be responsible for the aches and pains that you're feeling. But if you really feel like you want to sit down, then go ahead and sit for a minute. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel right over here. And if you haven't yet, as always, I'm always trying to grow more support for the channel on Facebook and Instagram. So follow me on Instagram and go to my Facebook page and give that a like, please. I'll include links in the description to both of those things. Other than that, I'll see you next time.